Fine for me, yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Yeah, warm welcome from my side. Hello. Yeah, hopefully you are all doing fine and you are all motivated to hear something about continuous security testing, yeah, or security testing at all. So this is something which I want to share. This is something where I'm here that I can bring my experience, what I made, yeah, to explain you my thoughts on the topic security testing. So thank you very much for having me here. You know, I call myself an engineer and I'm always trying for search for new solutions, new approaches, and actual security testing is not that new. Yeah? It's actually pretty old, but it became or the demand for it became very high. Just in fact that companies are releasing and deploying much faster and they don't have time for this big security test, which they hand over to external teams. So they need to integrate, so the teams need to integrate security testing in their software development lifecycle. And I guess you heard in the last weeks a lot of exploits or zero-day events. Yeah, so this very critical vulnerabilities which happened, like the Log4j maybe, or many others. And this became more and more. Yeah, and you need to test it. Otherwise, you will have a security leak in your product, and the damage to your company is very often not even countable because you get a bad reputation on the market. And for example, for myself, we work for a banking company, getting a bad rating on the Google Play Store or somewhere else would be very bad for us. So today I will talk exactly about this. Yeah, so today I will talk about SAST, DAST, IAST, and RASP, putting a DevSecOps teams on steroids, kind of the 4 fists and the hallelujah. Maybe you know this picture of this movie, which I of course have stolen, which I've used. If you don't know it, those two guys have pretty strong weapons, so they're fists. Yeah. And today I will use this metaphor to show you my fist in the security testing area, and then also the hallelujah, and hopefully that those fists are also strong as those are. Before I go into the details, please let me also introduce myself a little bit. So who am I? I'm Matthias Sachs. I'm from Austria, living in Vienna, and work there for Raiffeisen Bank International. I work there as an agile engineering coach. So it's nothing to do with coaching Scrum or Kanban. It's more about training and coaching mature practices about software development. Yeah, and I personally specialized myself in the area of test automation. Test automation. Originally, I am developer and upgraded myself, so to call, in the area of test automation. I'm also the other organizer for a community of practice for test automation. So this is profession and passion. I like to share what we're doing in conferences, meetups, webinars like this, and also in magazines. So maybe you have also written an article of myself. If you want to get in contact, please use this contact data. And with that, it's enough about myself. It's enough about company. Let's go into the topic. What you can expect from today. What is the agenda? First, I want to share my motivation, that you understand it, what was my driver, and maybe it's the same driver in your side. Then I want to explain you what is security testing, what is my understanding, the 4 fists, the hallelujah, and then 10 steps how to get there. First, the motivation and some numbers, which I got to during my motivation, or my research. What motivated me? Let me share some bullet points. Security testing was always something for me which was there and it was important, but it was not really tangible for me. Yeah, it was always we need to do that. Yeah, security is important. It's not possible that we have a security leak or bug in our software. But what we really need to do, that was always something I don't really know. It's always doing an external company, and it's always very expensive. Yeah, because you had to wait for it, you had to request it, you had to contact this external company which is doing the external penetration test, then you get the results, you need to fix something, give it again. It's expensive, time-consuming, annoying, and so on. And that was my biggest driver. It really slows down the release cycle time. Release cycle time, the time from commit up that the customer can use it. Yeah, so where it is in production. And as a developer, as a test automation practicer, I want to release very fast. I mean, That's what we want. Yeah, we want to be fast on the market. That's what makes the difference. And either you go fast without security testing, with a high risk, or you mitigate the risk or slow down the risk and implement security testing. And I was like, come on, there must be a solution. Yeah, big companies, big IT companies, they release several times a day. They need to be doing something there. Yeah. So that was kind of my motivation why I went into this topic. Of course, also I work for a bank and security is important, but from a private perspective, that was my biggest motivation. And then I started to do research. And I want to share some numbers which shows that it's really a hot topic and we need to do something here. The first number is the biggest, so you want to start with the biggest number, and 90%, I mean, that's pretty high. And 90% of all security incidents which happen are due to attackers using known software bugs. How crazy is that? So they just use things which is known, yeah, which is already public. And for example, for Log4j, for those who know it, yeah, still companies, because there you can do the research on the Maven repositories, companies are downloading versions where the bug is included. So still companies use the old version, and of course attackers can just use it. And 90%, the numbers are from 2020, yeah, of the attacks are by known software bugs. So we could just fix it. Yeah? If you have it in the cycle, you could fix it. The next is plus 40. This is a trend. So on the year-on-year comparison, the increase of the attacks from ransomware increased by 40%. Yeah, and the year before it was lower. So it's an exponential growth. This is because computing power got very cheap, and also the how, yeah, so that you can attack something got very easy. Yeah, also with the Dockerization, you can download the Docker image, which does crazy stuff. You just have to feed it with an URL, and you can attack something. And that's the reason why it gets more and more. So the attacks will be, so in 5 years, maybe triple of the number, something like this. Yeah. And the next number, the small bubble is on purpose, but actually it's the biggest one. This is about money. And of course, this one is not estimated, but the estimated damage in 2020 was about $20 billion, which caused by security incidents. Yeah? And of course, I don't want to contribute, or I don't want that my company contributes to that number. It's already too high. So these are some numbers which I found, which showed me, okay, I'm on the right track and we need to do something, and we can do something pretty easy, especially for the first number. Yeah. Because if I know something, come on, let's fix it. Good. What is security testing? Or what is continuous security testing? And I'm quite sure if you ask 10 people, you get 11 different answers. Joke, yeah? But you know what I mean. Because many people have a thought about it, but they don't really know what they're talking about. It was the same on my side. So let's give you my explanation of security testing. And this is, I really simplified it because I really like, yeah, keep it short and simple. Security testing. Yeah, so during security testing, vulnerabilities are discovered and attempts are made to exploit them. So how easy is that? This is what we understand under security testing. And I distinguish here between, or we distinguish here between, or divide them into 3 different types. The first is the vulnerability assessment. This is, for example, if you have some old code libraries, some old Java version, some old Log4j version, whatever. Yeah. So this is called vulnerability assessment. The next is penetration testing, because many of you know that. Yeah. So penetration testing, that the system gets analyzed and attacked by simulated malicious users, yeah, that they get access into the system. For example, you have cross-site scripting enabled or something like this, that they can bypass the login or whatever and get into the system without having credentials. And the last one is compliance testing. It's also known as conformity testing or regulatory testing or tests, so that you need to test to be compliant to a certain standard. For example, you want to be PCI compliant, which would fit for a financial company, then you need to comply to these regulations. Good. So these 3 types, or these 3 groups, or and I have 2 groups for you. Sorry, these 3 types, 2 groups. One is functional security tests. This is what you as a team align on, what you want to test as a functional test. Could be manually or automated. Yeah. So for example, you write a test for your login, yeah, but you are validating if your password policy works or if the credential management works. Yeah. So you log in as a user and you check or verify if you don't see any admin view, yeah, or you have some access to the customer group and you don't see any other customer groups. So you really write functional security tests and execute them during your releases, yeah, after deployment and so on. And the other one is non-functional security test. Of course, this is now very often a bigger group and more known. Here, I want to explain you also the OWASP. Yeah, this should be known by every test engineer. This is the Open Web Application Security Project. This is a community which defines a lot of things about security testing. Also gives some standards, gives you some nice tooling which you can use. Everything is of course here open source, and they're pretty powerful, and I highly recommend to check out their website and what they're doing. And with non-functional security tests, you check more or less what you saw before, yeah. So you try to check if you use some outdated software libraries, yeah, some vulnerability checks, compliance checks, and so on. So you can use it out of the box. You use a software for it. You will see afterwards also a little bit of tooling because as an engineer that it gets more tangible and visible for you. Good. So security tests, that's what I understand under security testing or continuous security testing. Another question is how we can get rid of these vulnerabilities, of these findings. And here my answer is, or are, the 4 fists. Of course, there are more approaches out on the market, but with these 4 fists, if you use those, you are already at a very good level. Let's start. Let's get into some details. We start with SAST. So static application security testing. What do we understand? What do we do here? So SAST is a white box testing approach. Yeah? So it means you need to have access to the source code, to the binaries, and so on. And it checks them if you have there already some vulnerabilities. It's very good because you can use it very early in the software development lifecycle. It's a shift left approach. And there's a little bit of drawback, yeah, because you cannot discover any runtime or environmental issues. But to be honest, that's also not what SAST is designed for. SAST is really very early that you get the feedback at the implementation. So when you're coding, if you have the IDE plugin, you get it immediately that you have some issues with whatever. Don't have an example right now. Man, sorry. And tooling is here, for example, SonarQube, which is pretty known, team scale to a certain degrees, or OWASP, for example. Here we have the tooling dependency check, which is which you can also use here for that. Yeah, highly recommended. Pretty easy the implementation and the usage, in my opinion. The next, DAST, so dynamic application security testing. We had white box before, obvious. Now we come to black box testing. It's a black box testing approach. So this means you need an application which is running. So you don't have any access to the binaries, you don't have any access to the source code, you test your system. So it's a little bit late in the SDLC. You need to deploy it, you need an environment, and you verify there with so for injection techniques like SQL injection or JavaScript injection and something like this, that you can get access into the system without the permission. And tools are here like, again, from OWASP, the tooling called ZAP. You will see this in a second. WebSube or Gauntlet, or there are so many tools there. But, I always stick to the OWASP tooling community, but I don't want to give you any recommendations. It's just my experience, which gives us very good feedback, and they work really good. I told you I'm a developer and an engineer, so I need to show at least some, not source code, but tool. This is, for example, OWASP ZAP. Yeah, you can download the Docker and run it if you're a lazy guy like me and don't want to deal with any environmental issues. So you run it. This is then the UI what you get. If you want to use it, you also can, of course, use CLI. Yeah. And what you need to do is you put your URL there. This is not a training. I just want to make it visualize it, how easy you can use it. Yeah, there are lots of configurations, but let's do the simple standard check. Yeah, the URL, and then it starts. For example, this is the URL to a login. Yeah, and then it starts checking. Are there, so there's a spider that it checks all other links which could be maybe accessed. Yeah, so I forgot password link and whatever. Yeah, and it screens if there are some security leaks. Yeah, because through the URL you can get a lot of information out of your software. Yeah, for example, which web server you use and so on. Yeah, and it exploits them or screens them. Sorry. And after this, you get the result, something like this. Yeah, so it's grouped by major, minor, and so on. And for example, here you then cross-site scripted and external redirects and path and so on. Yeah, and this is really fast. Yeah, the Docker image, a URL, and start, and you get it. And of course, you can also execute it in your CLI, in your pipeline, and so on. And I mean, I don't recommend that you check for all findings, but for the major one, you should take a look on it. Good. Some view how easy it is to implement DAST. So we had SAST and DAST. Now becomes the third phase, IAST, interactive application security testing. What is that? Why we need it? What is the advantage? It addresses the shortcomings of SAST and DAST. It combines both elements or both approaches. So IAST uses, because with DAST and so on, there you have the possibility that you have quite a lot of false positives. Yeah, because sometimes it's just makes no sense, the finding, but it's there, but the user can never get there. Yeah, and with IAST you reduce it. The drawback is there is an agent which you need to install, so it needs to run with your system, with your app, and it does analysis. Yeah? It always controls what is happening. And it analyzes the entire app. So it checks about the runtime, about data flow, about some configuration which is happening, of course, the HTTP request responses, and also libraries and frameworks which is used. Because if you get into the application, a broader range of source code is just accessed. Yeah? Because if you're always at the login level, come on. And it is a learning tool, depending, of course, on the tool which you use. But in general, all these tools are based on learnings. Yeah. So more often you execute it, it learns about the application and shows you then, hey, this is an issue. Check it. Why this is important? Because this question I get quite often. A lot of people think that application just needs to be protected at the login level. Yeah. So that no one can get in. But very rarely it gets considered if you get in, what you can do. Just consider your colleague which sits next to you, maybe not now, but in the company. Of course, no one is a black hat, yes, so no one is a criminal. But if you get to access into an application and then you see some very interesting data about transactions on the stock market, which of course you don't have any access, but you know how to bypass something, that's critical. Yeah, you should not be careful about that. Facebook loses regularly tons of data. I don't know how they, or Meta, sorry, right now, they do that. Of course, sometimes they exploit a known bug, but sometimes also they have the issue that some employee shared something which is not shareable. Yeah? So you need to protect your application also inside, so after login. And here IAST is quite a good tool. Of course, also reduce of false positives and so on, so not only for that. And the tool which is I also can mention here is the Contrast Community Edition, which is what I know, so open source. So this is IAST. Yeah? It combines the shortcomings. So it does static checks, but also dynamic checks with your test. You can also, for example, execute your test automation cases with that. No need to do it manually, but also that is possible. The last one is RASP. So what is missing? Runtime application security protection. Yeah. So it's more a monitoring and rather a testing approach. but still it's under the hood of security testing. It's under the hood or in the responsibility of the test engineer, or at least the one who is driving the topic. So it's less a testing tool, it's more a security tool. What is it doing? It works inside the application. Yeah, so you attach it to your environment or plug it to your environment, and it continuously executes security checks. Some of them you get out of the box, some of them you have to write by your own. Yeah, and it checks how your system, how your application behaves. This is very essential. Yeah, it's not only the RAM usage or open threads or whatever. Depends on what you do, and you can react. So you can, for example, make an alert, which is, I guess, one of the first things you do. And if you're learned from it and you know how it behaves, you can go up to it that you really destroy the attacker session. Yeah? So you kick it out. And this is something which is very important because you never can test everything. Yeah, the log4j bug was there quite a long time without knowing it. But if you have some RASP in place, you can at least alert it and destroy the session that you don't have the big damage. Maybe a short experience with Zoom from one of the last meetups where I presented, because there we got a Zoom bomb. Yeah, so we got a joiner which played some weird music and drawing, and we had to shut down the webinar actually, which is very bad. And Zoom apologized to us, the company, directly, because one of their RASP was not very good working, so they were not able to block the attacker, which was of course bad. But they told us that they fixed the bug and it will not happen anymore. So that's also, it's such big companies, it can happen. Good. And here tools, for example, again from OWASP App Sensor, or also with Contrast Community Edition, you can do something like this. Okay, what we learned up to now? The 4 fists. SAST, white box. Yeah, so it checks your code dependencies. DAST, black box. It checks environment and the application. IAST, it combines the shortcomings of SAST and DAST. Yeah, but you need the agent. And RASP, this is more a monitoring. Yeah, so it's a security tool rather than a testing tool, but it protects kind of your production or it verifies if you get attacked. Good. So these are the 4 fists. Now it's time for the hallelujah. But before I come to the hallelujah I want to share you, I need to mention one thing, which is very, very important. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm here today. The most important competence is the culture. In your team, awareness about security and security testing is the most important one. This topic alone is a lot more than enough content for another talk. And I don't want to go here into details, but it is very important that you are aware, yeah, because you are developing code, or you are testing, or you are, I don't know which roles are in the audience, but at the end, whole team approach, we are responsible for the software qualities, and if we have the awareness of security testing, we care for it. Very often this is not done. Very often we think security is done by the external security department, but that's not true. Development is also not done by an external company. Let's come back. The 4 fists and the pipeline. Yeah, this is kind of the hallelujah which you can achieve, which puts also the DevSecOps teams on steroids. Let me draw the pipeline. Yeah, in the phases which we have. So design phase, coding phase, integration, deployment, testing. Of course, testing is happening all over the phases, but here I talk about the real test execution. Yeah? And then kind of production runtime defense. This is kind of a secure CI/CD pipeline, which should be in each and every team. And here we have some triggers. And to these triggers, I have to give you some activities which you should do or can do. In the design phase, so where you're designing your application or your feature or your bug fix, if it's a big one, I don't know. You can do here some activities. For example, threat modeling. Very, very good approach. Yeah, you should do that. Yeah, so visualize your application, where your boundaries, where your threads going, your requests, where could be something where you get attacked. And define here function security test, what I mentioned before with the login. And there are, of course, many other features in your application, but login is obvious. Write your security tests. If you have not defined them, how you would execute them. So this is already the design phase. Then coding phase. Triggers is here the coding itself, of course, code review, and kind of continuous activities or triggers. And here comes already the first fist into the game. Here we need SAST. Yeah, I mentioned coding, SAST, white box, and very important with the IDE plugin. I would never set it up with centrally that it executes overnight or whatever. Add it with the IDE that if you're committing or have you have it configured, you get the feedback, hey, this is a finding, fix it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's difficult. I know teams which have it included in the pull request or merge request, depending on the merge request that you get there, the feedback from SonarQube, you have these and that findings, or from TeamScale, whatever, and you can only merge it if you don't have a major one or no new ones and so on. A lot of good approaches. I personally like the IDE plugin. And here you can also do SCA, so software composition analysis. What is this doing is this is checking if you're using dependencies which have security vulnerabilities. So for example, NPM, so Node, yeah, if you use NPM and you add a library, I very often have the feeling I download the whole internet. And if you have somewhere in the dependency trees also some vulnerabilities. Or also a good approach could also be a fist. But not for now, I only focus on SAST. Next phase, building, deployment, packaging. Yeah. Here, again SAST. Why again SAST? Because you build it, yeah, your package. Very often you add new binaries. So this is then your package which just gets deployed. So you should also verify what versions I have here in place, because this is a very, very fast feedback thing, yeah? So SAST and additionally DAST. After deployment, for example, with overstep, you can attack your software already. And what I really like is that you just validating if it gets worse. Yeah, because very often you have a product and you don't have it from beginning on the security testing, and that you have, if you started, that you align on the status quo, this is our state. And from now on, we don't make it worse. Or no major, yeah, maybe a minor one is accepted. And again, SCA, yeah, as I mentioned, if it's packaged, you can run the static checks again. Then we come to testing phase. The triggers testing, come on. That was clearer. And here we come to the next fist. This is, so again, DAST, because very often at the user acceptance test environment and so on, it makes definitely sense to run the DAST checks again. Yeah, because again, very fast feedback, or let's say fast feedback, and IAST. Yeah, so have your agent here installed. Use the IAST benefits, what it combines, get insights, get findings, what is if someone getting into the application and so on. You can also do this with DAST, yeah, but with a higher false positive rate. Here's the place for function security testing. Here's the place for doing some penetration testing. Also with overstep, for example, you can run your first penetration tests. This does not mean that you don't need the external one anymore. Very often you need that because they are certified and so on. But the report which you get delivered from them will be a much smaller one because you fix already a lot of them in advance. And the last phase is some continuous activity in production. And yes, here we talk about RASP, that you set up your monitors, that you see what is happening and protect your production environment, or at least that you get alerted. This is the pipeline. This is kind of our goal, our aim, our very ambitious goal. And let me give you as my last slide, the 10 steps how to get there, or the 10 steps how I recommend to start with. And I mentioned the most important skill or thing is competence of security testing, awareness. So if you're an enterprise, join forces with security department. If you're a startup, maybe you have it already inside your team, because there is no security department, I think so. So this is very important. I know that's tricky. Also for us, it is work in progress, but it works much better than, I don't know, 2 years ago or 1 year ago. Upskill yourself in security testing. Yeah, for example, going to a webinar where someone speaks about security testing. Just kidding, but also that, yes. Yeah, or get a security coach into your team who can bring in experience already from other teams and can validate where it makes sense to apply security testing in your product, in your team. Then train in threat modeling, because it makes things easier and it's a very early phase that you create awareness, that you know what is happening, who is communicating with what, where is some potential risk. A very simplified version of threat modeling you can see here. Introduce misuse stories or misuse cases, so-called evil stories. These are misuse cases, sorry. This is not often done. So this is a functional security test that you really write a test case that someone is hacking your system, yeah, or gets into it, so or is doing an SQL injection at the login, something like this, yeah. That you can implement the test case and execute it. Set up DAST. I know this is now late, step 5. But you know, things can go here a little bit in parallel, especially the upskilling part. Set up SAST, with the IDE plugin. Yeah, I personally recommend SoloCube because, I mean, I guess for a simple usage, it's free. Of course, then they have some enterprise license model and so on, but still go for DAST, that you get this very, very fast feedback from the static code analysis. Then go for DAST and please add it to the pipeline. This is an experience what I made with teams, that they implement DAST, they set it up, they have their Docker running very often on their local machine and execute it 3, maybe 4 sprints, and then they stop because they don't have the effort, they don't look at the results anymore. No, that's not how you do it. Add it to your pipeline, as I mentioned, align on the positive trend. That's already the next step. Define some metrics and a positive trend, because I'm not a big fan that you say you want to reduce the number by 10% and 4 is good and 5 is bad. It's better that you have a positive trend, that you continuously work on the things and never stop. And of course, put it to your team agreements, definition of done, however, but make it visible. Then go for IAST in your test environment. See if this is something where you benefit out of it. Yeah. See how it works, what value it brings. Go for automation of the functional security tests. Of course, also non-functional security tests, if you can automate them or if it's already automated. And focus on the low-hanging fruits. Yeah? Align on the team, which is very important, which is easy to automate, and go for it. Otherwise, again, you will stop running them. And the last step is setting up RASP to protect your environments, to protect your production. This is how I recommend it. Yeah. Does not mean that it's a must like this. Very often teams start with RASP because they have already security issues and they need to start with RASP because all other things don't work. Thank you very much for your attention. Yeah. My main focus was that I show you what I understand on the security testing, that I create here some awareness that it is here. Yeah. We need to do it. You saw the numbers. It's not really rocket science, to be honest. And now I'm here for questions. I'm very curious, which one you have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have questions in chat.
Okay, sorry, I need to stop this screen sharing. Give me 1 second. Here we have it. Please also, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak. That's the cool stuff. Not listening to a recording. Good. First question, what does it mean works inside the application in the context of RASP? With RASP, so you have a tool for RASP, so for the monitoring, and you can write scripts that you, for example, open your application that it can look into your Java heap stack, whatever. Yeah. So this is depending on the tool, of course, that you can really get insights how your application is working. That depending on how you feed the RASP tool, how good it is. Yeah. If you just use it for screening memory, so only for the environment, you can also think, okay, maybe something has happened. But if you are able and feed it with information and data, which you open, yeah, of course. So it's inside the application, it's inside your environment. Yeah? So there is no additional risk to that. Then the monitoring is much better. Yeah? So this is what I mean with it works inside the application. Hopefully this was the answer. If not, please, Dennis, we can elaborate on it.
Particular tools regarding RASP?
I mentioned the OWASP app sensor. To be honest, I cannot give you here a lot of recommendations because in my team or the team where I supported, we didn't have it. I just saw it from other teams which had it. They had even some cool monitors in the room, and they used this OWASP app sensor. I don't know if they used any additional tools on top, but they had a pretty good alerting. They even had this, how is this called, alert sign in the room. Of course, it's a gadget, but still it was cool. And they had pretty good insights. Yeah. And they didn't use it also not only for security text, by the way, also for optimizations, yeah, because they saw that they had memory issues and a lot of things, and they optimized in their app. But that's now a little bit off topic, but still, it was for them very beneficial. Good. Next question from Olena. Do RASP tools provide some matrix based on which we could improve security, fix bugs that influence on security lags? Good question. To be honest, I don't know. Yeah. As I mentioned, I'm not a RASP expert. I will also do here a research because I'm also very interested if there are some best practices or some values which are shared by other companies where you should react on. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah. Is this okay for you, the question? Because you activated your video, you want to share something?
No, I just listened to you, so I just want to share with you my reaction on your answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is App Sensor a methodology? Sorry, another question came in. Is App Sensor a methodology, a framework, or a tool? Good question. Sorry, I'm not experienced in the OWASP App Sensor. Please check it out. They have everything pretty well documented, and they give a lot of best practices and recommendations. So I cannot answer the question. Yeah. It's also really not about the tool, yeah, because there are so many tools. It's also for test automation if you go for it. If you go for API testing or GUI testing, there are so many tools outside, or for development. Yeah, so many ways lead to Rome. It's more about the approach. Yeah, if you Google now RASP, yeah, and you choose another tool, fine. It's not about, all tools have almost the same feature stack, especially from the open source area. And from the commercial ones, they have 1-2 additional features. Very often you hear something with machine learning or AI and something like this. Be careful with those selling keywords. But it's really about that you consider RASP. That was also the reason why I didn't focus on the tooling, because very often, yeah, this is not so beneficial because there are so many outside. And maybe tomorrow there comes a new one. Yeah. Sorry for not being able to answer the questions about OWASP App Sensor, but I will do my homework. I will upskill myself here that in the next webinar I can answer them.
I have one more question, if I could answer in voice. Regarding API of these tools and regarding continuous integration, like on each build, we are going to check some security lags, so on. So do that tools you used have some open APIs which we could integrate into Jenkins or maybe somehow?
Yes. So all these tools I mentioned have exactly those APIs, or they are even integrated in your source code repository tool. So if you use, for example, GitHub, they pretty closely integrated, or GitLab, yeah, so they or support them. They also have tooling which you can use from them. Yeah, so if you use GitHub Enterprise, you can use something. Don't ask me now how the tool is called. I should know it because we use it. Yeah, sometimes I forget the name. And then you get the results already at the pull request, but also what you mentioned. So for example, if you use overstep, you can call it from command line and get the results. For example, after the build, you have a Jenkins job that you execute your profile, which you created because what you want to test on this DAST setting, yeah, and then you get the feedback back with the results and so on. Yeah. So yes, everything, that's also the reason why I put it into the pipeline, can be set up that no manual interaction or is necessary.
Okay, thank you very much for answering.
But thank you very much for the good question. This is very important. Yeah. We have another question. At what level of DSOMM should the SCA be implemented? I don't know what DSOMM means. Sorry, don't know this abbreviation. About SCA, as I mentioned, I added it to the activities at the trigger of the coding and the build because it is worth it. Yeah, I didn't have it as a dedicated fist because it is a little bit part of SAST. Yeah. It's our own approach, but I personally think that SAST, DAST, IAST, and RASP is more important because I don't want to open up of 5 things. Yeah, 4 is already a lot. And that's the reason why I went into details of SCA. If you're interested here, I recommend that you do the research by your own. I guess the DSOMM means maybe the depth, because this is what you can set there. I don't know at which level it makes sense where to stop. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly the question with the depth.
Okay.
And I have another one. So you mentioned having DAST, SAST, RASP, and IAST all in the pipeline. And then we're also following the agile methodology. Don't you think that it would actually cause delays in delivering the new features if we go through all that process?
Very good question. Now we can discuss a lot. No, this is really good question. And that's the same question which I very often have in the teams. Yeah, that, oh, come on, we cannot do this because it will lead to the fact that we can deploy not so fast. Yeah, and it's the same as test automation. Now, if you don't go for test automation and you do the manual testing, or you don't test, you can of course release faster, but you have the risk. And this is the same with security testing. That's also the reason why I put these 10 steps. You should not go for all 10 steps in the next sprint. Maybe you can set up the steps 1 step per sprint, something like this. Yeah. So in the next sprint, you go for SAST. And SAST, all of these tools will not slow down anything. Just, okay, for the resources which you need to invest to set it up, yes. But I would not set it up that it will block a merge as a pull request, or it will block a deployment because you have a DAST finding. At the beginning, I would use it to collect the data, yeah, and show it to the product owner, and show it, hey, the last sprint we implemented 1 major finding, 5 critical, or whatever this is called, and believe me, at some point in time, he or she will say, yeah, okay, we should test it, and of course fix it, yeah, not only test it, because no one wants to have some security issues. And I know a lot of applications are internally available, some are externally available, but still, yeah, there's always a risk. And this is something, because Agile, you mentioned Agile has a lot to do with transparency, yeah, and whole team approach, of course, end-to-end responsibility. And it's our responsibility as test engineers to make exactly this visible, and to create the awareness. And if the product owner has the awareness, okay, security testing is important, then he, she, or she will care for the resources for it, that you don't need to reduce your cycle time. And at the end, you will speed it up. That's maybe one experience what I can share you at the beginning for our mobile app, banking app, the external penetration test. Really, we got a report with I don't know how many pages, and it was really a lot of effort for us to fix so much that we can release. Of course, all the findings made sense. Yeah. But after we went into SAST and DAST, it was the first two approaches which we implemented. The next penetration test was much better, yeah, because we fixed the things just in the software development. And maybe some developers are in the room, things which you get feedback very fast, so in some minutes is good. But if you get the feedback after, I don't know, 2 weeks, come on, I don't know what I have implemented 2 weeks ago. And then of course the fixing takes more time. So overall, yeah, your cycle time will be reduced. Sorry for the long answer. Hopefully I was able to make it on the point. But these methodologies and agile practices and slowing down things, this is often very tricky.
Agreed.
And also, and please interrupt me if someone has a question, please interrupt me, yeah, or put it to the chat. And it really depends how fast you get there. Some teams take longer and some are pretty fast. And it always relates to the awareness. That's also what I really want to focus on, that reuse the numbers, what I shared, and you can find them on Google, that the risk gets higher from year to year. And the earlier you invest, the better it is.
I have one more question regarding continuous testing. So from my experience, I just play around with directory scan, and one of this tool, it was scanning around 30 minutes. So it means like it's long, and if we just bring some other tools like network mapping and so on, it will take much more time. So from your experience, how often do you run these security tests?
Okay.
I know that the perfect solution is put it on CI on each build, but it would be too long and maybe no need, only for some master branch or release.
So the SAST, yeah, so the static code analysis or static security testing, I would really recommend that you have it in your IDE, yeah, because this feedback time is, yeah, very fast, yeah. But I guess you talk more about DAST approaches, and I would not recommend to do it for each build, because if you have a bigger product, more delivery as a product teams, or how to call it, and a lot of developers, a lot of builds per day, maybe it makes no sense, yeah. Because also the DAST check takes some time. It's not 30 minutes, depends what you're doing, but it's, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on your system, of course. But you should execute it if you merge to master or release branch, however you have structured your release approach. Yeah, we deploy for master, so the master is the point of truth if it comes to production. And we have more staging environments. So we have the dev environment, yeah, where more or less every build gets deployed to, then system integration, user acceptance, and production. Sometimes system test, but on the system integration test, there we always execute the DAST, depending on the team. I talked about the teams where this is implemented, yeah, and often also simplified version on the system test. But on the system, so before the user acceptance test, yeah, you should get already the feedback of the findings. That you don't have to, have the user acceptance test and then you change the versioning and so on. So you should get this feedback pretty fast. And if you have set up your pipeline like that, you do the build, you deploy it to dev, you execute there your first test automation test cases, I think so. Then you deploy it to the system test or system integration test. There you have again, hopefully your test automation things, which running, so API tests, GUI tests, and you also execute the DAST checks. Yeah, and you get this together of your test summary report. And if everything is green, you deploy automatically to UAT. There you have your manual user tests if you need it or not. Yeah, depends on your cycle. And afterwards, everything is good and green. You go to production. So I recommend it somewhere there. So on the system integration test environment, if you have this, yeah, so just add it here. I don't want to change so I would not change the pipeline or the approach how I do it right now. I will just apply it at somewhere at this point. But after each build, I guess this is too much. It's also, it's very often that you need to make your own experiences. If you want to get insights fast, maybe you do it for each build at the beginning, just that you see what is happening. Yeah, because the implementation, also the adding of overstep is, for example, pretty easy. But then I guess if you go into a mode where you have everything set up properly, it will end up somewhere there.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome, or at least it ended up there on our place. Maybe in 1 year I share something different. I don't know. This is what I can share. And by the way, yeah, we still have the security department. Because there's also very often a question if we don't have a security department anymore. No. We're still a financial institute, and of course we have a security department because they do a lot of things. But the collaboration now works much better. So in many teams, especially for retail, we have a security engineer from this department in the Agile setup and work together. Yeah. We have another question. Should DAST even be part of the pipeline if it takes longer? Yes, as I mentioned, also your functions, also your test automation tickets or your manual tasks take longer. Yeah, if you have 1,000 test cases which are automated, also those have an execution time, and that's the reason why you have test suites there. Yeah, so you test what you want to test. You never test everything, or maybe overnight you do that. And at the place where you can do, as I showed it on OWASP, you have different. Check it out. Yeah, you can run different how's it called, patterns. Yeah, what you want to test it. And one are pretty fast, and one are more sophisticated, and they take longer. And the fast one you can add. Yeah, this is really fast. Try it out. 1-2 minutes. Yeah. The longer, maybe you add it in your nightly builds if you have something like this. Yeah, maybe, or you run your full regression testing suite and then you additionally run the big DAST scan because you can also run the DAST with function test. Yeah, that it also does the screening if it gets inside the application and so on. Yeah, but this goes not very into the details of the tooling, but this is possible. So this is what I would recommend. Yes, DAST still, yes, please add it to the pipeline. I, as a developer, want to know in 5 minutes what happened with my change. And if I get the finding that I have implemented the possibility of cross-site scripting, then I want to know it pretty fast, not after 2 weeks, because I need to fix it.
Makes sense. Thank you. So I have another one. I mean, so how often do you come across the developers? You ask them to put in the linting plugins, you know, for the SAST thing, and you find that they disabled it after a day or two. So how often does this happen?
We are enterprise. We have centrally managed devices. No, no, this is not true for the developers. Yes, that's an issue. And that's the reason, and I mentioned also in the presentation, the triggers. Yeah, one is the coding and one is the merge request. And we have it mandatory plugged in the merge request. So there you have the findings again, and you can overrule it. Yeah, but this needs to be done from the lead developers, or how should I call them now? So you could, of course, ignore all the findings locally, or even ignore them, or turn off the plugin. But if you want to merge it to the master, you cannot. Yeah, so you cannot say merge. So this needs to be done by someone else, and you have the findings there visualized. And generally, no one does that the merge then, because before we fix it. In general, the teams behave like this, then they make a peering session, and because very often it's just a matter of missing knowledge, yeah, and then we sit together and then do the upskilling with a peering session, fixing the things, and next time it's clear for everyone. So this is how we have it set it up. Yeah? So we have it. We always have the thing on the merge request, which is mandatory. But please, not for each and every project. It's always depending on the risk. Yeah. If you have a project where the risk is really low, maybe you don't have it. I don't recommend it, but maybe you don't have it. If it's a time booking application of all employees when they start working and finish working, maybe it's not so high critical as for your bank, for your company, and you don't do it. Yeah. But of course, it's not recommended. Good. Any other questions? And thank you for all the questions. Yeah, this is really cool, very interactive. I like it very much.
So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure, or it is a pleasure, actually. Yeah, hopefully I was able to share some insights for myself. Yeah, you have to know. Yeah, 1 year ago I had no clue about security testing. Yeah, this is where I went into the material because also the demand in our company increased, and this was at the time where we started working together with the security department. I was like, come on, and it's early and it's quite brave myself to already start sharing things, but that's how I behave, because I want to share this on the early stage, because this is maybe how we're in the stage where you are. Yeah, that was the reason why I cannot answer the one or the other detail about OWASP App Sensor, for example, and so on. Sorry for that, but still, I hope that I was able to share these insights. Yeah, that the awareness of security testing is very important, all about security, and also that I was able to give you some hints how to start with. And yeah, hopefully we will hear us somewhere on LinkedIn or on social media, and you can share that you achieved great things after, I don't know, some weeks. Good. With that, thank you very much for this webinar. Also, thank you very much to the organizers for having me here and organizing everything. And with that, I want to say thank you and wish you a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.